introduce my fellow panelists here. I'll just be moderating. Tim Marima is the editor for the Daily Yonder. So you want to say hello, Tim, and I guess where you're zooming in from, I missed that part myself. I am here in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Hey, Caroline. Tim Marima. I'm in Norris, Tennessee, which is about halfway between Knoxville and the state line of Kentucky, so East Tennessee.
Great. Pam, you are from the Midwest Center for Investigative Reporting. And do you want to say hello and tell us where you're at today?
Hi, everybody. I'm based in Champaign, Illinois, and good to meet you. Good to be here, especially with my buddy Tim.
And last but not least, Terry is from the Keene Journal Sentinel. Terry, do you want to say hello and tell us where you're at?
Yeah, sure. Terry Williams. I'm from the Keene Sentinel, which is in the southwest corner of New Hampshire, Keene, New Hampshire, and very happy to be here and nice to meet everybody.
Great. Well, we are all in rural journalism. I guess that's why we're gathered here today, to talk about news and how it affects rural communities and rural places. So I first wanted to open up the discussion with my panelists here, just to talk about sort of what national trends and issues have been coming up in rural journalism lately, and maybe if you're keen on talking about what your publication has been covering recently that's interesting or pertinent, not that it isn't all that. And I can call on you, or whoever wants to jump in first, feel free.
I'm happy to start it off. As probably is the case for many, we've been covering the pandemic and trying to make it relatable here. That's been kind of the dominant news theme for some time. Lots of things have spun off that. Obviously, we did a series on parenting during a pandemic that was pretty eye-opening and something that the community seemed to appreciate, particularly as it related to childcare. Prior to that, we had been doing some kind of new type of work in justice reporting, alternative ways of covering cops and courts. And we've been trying to figure out of late how to reach diverse communities that we're not able to get to typically with our print product. And that has led to some projects that we hope will help us kind of penetrate into those audiences, including a health reporting lab that we're pretty excited about and has been underway now for a couple of months. So much of this is spun out of the pandemic, or it's been related to it, business coverage, education coverage, sports, everything has been somehow impacted. And it would be hard to say that that hasn't really kind of occupied our time for the last couple of years.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's probably going to be a theme for all of us, and you know, especially how it's often largely impacting rural communities more than others.
Yep.
Tim or Pam, do you want to jump in?
Want me to go next? Tim Marima, and first of all, it's so cool to see Kim and Donna and Bryce and other folks. Who am I missing here? Folks who've had frequent bylines in the Daily Yonder. That's really cool. So the Daily Yonder is a national publication, and so the pandemic or the worldwide health crisis or whatever, how Bo, the fifth column, described it, has occupied our attention. Of course, and we've so we try to provide a national context that helps rural places and rural people who are concerned about rural places think about maybe what's happening in their own community or what could happen nationally that would affect rural places. So we've had the national numbers throughout the pandemic. We've had a variety of reporting on groups that are working on vaccination drives, the vaccination rates in rural versus urban, and then the difference in care, healthcare that rural versus urban areas have access to, and what that has meant. There's a gap between the rural death rate and the urban death rate. The rural death rate cumulatively is higher, about 30%, and it's been running 50 to 100% higher week to week. And it's so, you know, we've explored why, the different reasons for that, and all along trying to push back against the notion that people, oh, we know why that is. It's because rural people are A, B, C, D. So end of story. It's more complicated than that. And then we also had a lot of interesting stories over racial justice and policing when that was, you know, the summer before last, and how, you know, those national stories just stepped right into rural places. That was really interesting to watch. So that's some of what we've been doing.
Yeah, definitely. Pam, do you want to springboard?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Just for context, so we're nonprofit news and we cover agriculture and its role in agribusiness. And then Tim and I, or our newsrooms respectively, are part of a bigger initiative called the Rural News Network. So we're coming from the perspective, we're data journalists looking at agriculture, big ag, and its impact on farmers, rural communities, and all these related issues, which underpins a lot. And so a few things that we have been doing, in fact, we just had a story last week kind of updating some ongoing coverage on foreign held ag land, which you can actually search by county on our website, which has been kind of interesting. So we kind of take this look. I mean, we're in the Midwest, we're surrounded by corn and soybean fields, and it feels like there's a slight separation between rural communities and like Chicago, right? So there's this sort of a thing around Chicago. It's Chicago, then everything else is downstate. But the issues that we have covered really do kind of look at it through that lens, ag, and most of this is coincidentally in rural areas. Oh, thank you, Tim. Oh, well, you're awesome. Thanks. There's a great link over there you guys can check out.
Yes, yeah, there are probably a number of opportunities here to link stories from our various publications, and I admit I haven't prepared all of those, but if you guys want to drop them in, that would be great as you're able. So we've talked a lot already about the pandemic, about you know, racial injustice and trying to navigate that in rural community. Agriculture, of course, because we know that rural is feeding our nation. And so I wanted to ask all of you about how you differentiate sort of your coverage from national media. And I want to say that we at the Daily Yonder often see things and say, oh gosh, you know, that really isn't the way that we would have liked to have that covered. And then of course, there are some projects that are really great too. And so how are all of you thinking about this? You know, we have a small regional newspaper with Terry, you know, sort of a regional digital publication with Pam, and then Tim and I, by extension, are sort of thinking nationally. And I'm just curious about your thoughts on how we do things differently or not, or what's going well sort of on a larger scale.
So a couple of observations, and you know, during what's been I think a pretty tumultuous last 4 or 5 years, we have seen trust in media, particularly at the national level, you know, be pretty low, and that concerns us obviously because we care very much about how our readers think about us, and I think we take some comfort in the fact that there's clearly a distinction being drawn between attitudes toward national media versus local. And that's really important to us. And I think it gives us, you know, a certain amount of credibility that we're trying to build off, particularly as it relates to health reporting. There has never been a more divisive time for small communities, just like cities. I mean, you know, we've had some pretty explosive local board meetings over issues of masking in schools and, you know, all that. And we've had to navigate some pretty tricky, you know, conversations during that whole process. And I think one of the things that has been important to us is that throughout all of that, I think we've been able to kind of maintain a trusting relationship with our readers overall. A lot of it has we have had to do a lot more communication with readers. We've had to send a lot of letters to our readers explaining who we are, what our role is in the community, and allow our journalists to introduce themselves to our readers. And that, so they're getting a letter pretty much every month from us that shines a little bit more light in terms of our process and who we are. And I think that's helped a lot. We felt we needed to do that to hold on to our readership, obviously. We needed to do that almost as a defensive posture because there was just so much acrimony over national coverage and things of that nature. And I feel pretty good about it. I feel pretty good about the feedback we've gotten from those letters. I feel pretty good about the fact that locally people are differentiating between the two. And I don't feel good about the fact that national media are not trusted as much. That bothers me. But I feel like we've been able to make, you know, kind of cement ourselves in our legacy and our role better. And we don't have everybody in our camp, believe me. I mean, there's a lot of people that have canceled subscriptions over stuff, but I feel like we've done a better job of explaining people just the basic role that we perform and who it is that's performing it.
And that strikes me as sort of a tenet of rural in some ways, in that you can create these personal connections and have folks really understand who is providing their news and what's behind them. And, you know, that seems like that's a huge challenge for our big media conglomerates. Of course, that's obvious, but not that I know how to address it, but I think that's an interesting strength that rural has and brings in some ways, local journalism specifically. Tim or Pam?
Okay. Well, Terry, it's fascinating to hear what you're doing, and you know that sending letters. What a great strategy! And so Keene is what, 23,000 people or something like that. Okay, and it's kind of the market center of your that corner of New Hampshire, right? And are you 7 or 6 days a week?
Yeah, we're 6 days in
Six,
print,
okay.
7 days online.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I started in weekly newspapers, and you know, every story you wrote, you know, you knew who it was in there, and you know, you were going to see them. And so it's different at the Daily Yonder, that I don't see everyone that we write about, but we do connect with a lot of in the kind of the nonprofit network that we serve, and to some extent are kind of enmeshed in. There's feedback there, and some level of a similar accountability. And I can remember when I was at a daily feeling like, you know, that we were somehow appointed the watchdog of the community, and we had some kind of special status, not as you know, that we could get away with. We weren't as accountable to readers, because you know, it's like Ruth Buzzy used to say, we don't have to, we're the phone company. We don't have to, we're the newspaper, and we print money. And that has all changed. And it's different in the digital world. I think it's easier to niche ourselves and to hear from people who kind of agree with us. But in terms of how we look at rural coverage, you know, I'm a big believer that your audience it affects how you communicate, or it does. And the New York Times does some great coverage of rural topics. It's top, you know, nothing better, but it's written for Manhattan or an international elite audience, and it doesn't have to resonate. It's not designed to resonate in rural communities. And I can't say that we hit this every time, but my ideal would be that somebody could see a story in the Daily Yonder who's in a rural place and is experienced in that, and says, yeah, that sounds like, I get it. That sounds like they understand a bit of what it's like to be living where I live, or concerned about the issues. And I feel like I got a fair shake. So that's what we would strive for, I think.
Mhm.
I gotta say, I would echo what Tim said, and kind of where we've been challenged is really, I mean, we're covering ag, and farmers are there. We really want to connect with farmers living in these rural communities, and there is a automatic distrust, it seems, of the media to begin with. So breaking through that barrier, and then, so for a while, you know, we wanted to show off what we knew about farming, and we were using bigger words, and so then it got lost on the general audience. I remember having a discussion with one of the reporters, and he used a very specific word for a pesticide. I can't even pronounce it. And I said, listen, we need to not dumb it down. You know what I mean? As reporters, you want to just simplify this a little bit more. And he's like, no, people can look it up. No, that's not how that works. So it's part of that to try to build this trust. We want to say the difference between a silo and a grain bin. You know, thinking about the audience and who you're trying to reach. I will say too, additionally, the biggest distinction I think I see with our rural publications, or the places that cover it, being located in the areas that you're covering, makes a difference between national media, the things that we do here. Although, you know, I see some of our stories having, again, this sort of can have a national and global impact, and can resonate with these other audiences, but being here, I think, helps get at the nuances that you sometimes can miss with drop-in, you know, what do they call it, parachute in journalism, which is important. And I agree with Tim, right? Like, really good stuff, and you know, you have the time and to dedicate to this one topic, but definitely.
Yeah, and that idea of place, you know, is in many ways something that Tim and I can't enjoy as we try to report on the entire country, you know. But I think that is really important. And you know, we try to have our staff in different places across the country to be able to speak perhaps for some of these regions and things like that. The sort of next following question that I've been thinking about, and I was going to point this sort of at Terry, but I think we can all think about it, is this importance of local journalism that Terry was speaking about, with being able to make the people in his community aware of who's bringing them the news, that Pam's speaking about in terms of being in the places that are being reported on. Tim and I, trying to, in lots of ways, bring up local news and support it in sharing it and doing what we can to support other local newsrooms. I guess I sort of gave part of your answer away, Tim, but how can we as journalists be supporting local news? And also on the flip side, what do you think about what can communities be doing? Because it's obvious that that's really important.
Yeah, so that's great. We've learned a lot in the pandemic that goes beyond just the reporting side of it. The reliance of the local community on their local news source at times of crisis is, we've kind of learned how valued we were, and it's something that we've tried to keep the momentum about. And one of the things that came out of that is to try to come up with a deeper understanding of our community's health needs. We have serious health care access challenges here. We have the lowest number of primary care physicians per 10,000 people in the state. We have almost 30% of our doctors in this county are over age 75, and only 3% are under 35. So we're going to have healthcare access issues for years, and those are pre-existing conditions going into the pandemic, and they've gotten worse. So we decided that we should try to go out in the community and ask them, what do you think the biggest healthcare challenges are? Help us try to figure that out, because we have some sense for things, but we don't know. We don't have data. All we have is really kind of anecdotal understanding. And first of all, they love being asked the question, particularly by the local news organization. That's important to them. They love sharing their perspective. As it turned out, I think we talked to 30 odd people that were either docs or nurses or patients, or somehow, nonprofit leaders, business leaders. Everybody has a connection to healthcare. And they validated more or less what we thought were the cases, but they've surprised us on a few things. But it became pretty clear to us that our community needed more than what we could produce. I mean, we were not producing enough healthcare. We were just writing about COVID, and we're writing about that day's COVID, admissions and deaths and all that. We weren't really providing much perspective. So to dig deeper into that, we really needed to figure out a way to cover healthcare in a deeper, more meaningful sort of way. And again, trying to play off the fact that we believe we were trusted, or that we believe we are trusted. And so that's given way to this health reporting lab that I'm out raising money to support, because we don't have the budget to do it ourselves. But I think that these types of things come out of leveraging what rural journalism is, what strong local journalism is, how important it still is to a community. I don't think you can have a healthy community without a healthy news organization. I just don't think that's possible. And I think a lot of people agree with that, or have come to agree with it. And this is an interesting moment in time to be thinking about that, and thinking about what else can we do to burnish that reputation, that trust.
Yeah. Pam?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because, here I'm saying about being here, and, we are based in Champaign. I say we as an organization, but due to the pandemic and other things, ask me where our reporters are. So, you know, a few are scattered, one in Minneapolis, one's in Michigan, one's in Montana, and don't ask, and then one is coming into Iowa. So it's interesting because, you know, connecting then with the communities that we're reporting on, I mean, I think that because we have potentially the technology to better connect with people, but it's still a bit of a challenge. And I still at the core believe in shoe leather journalism over sea leather journalism. I coined that, by the way. Shoe leather journalism over sea leather reporting, that, you know, getting out and talking to people can be one of the most impactful ways to really do right, you know, by our reporting. And still it's funny. I mean, Carolyn, you were just mentioning, you know, I'm in Minneapolis and we're trying to cover this. There are ways to do it and ways to do it well. I will tell you honestly, Wall Street Journal has this really great ag reporter who's based in Chicago, and like he's in Chicago, right? And he's covering these stories of these issues that I'm seeing locally too. And I'm like, how is it getting? And it turned out there's like this, it's not a secret, but I call it a secret farm channel going on that he's able to query and get sources and get farmers talking about it. And I'm like, that's brilliant, you know, why didn't I think of that? So I think there are ways to do it and do it successfully, but maybe, you know, as reporters covering rural from wherever you're sitting, the most important thing, of course, is to read whatever local news they have available and to read all these channels, right? I think is super key, because again, I think a lot of this is so nuanced. It's important to demonstrate that you're aware of it.
Yeah, I love that. Both of you guys, I think it's amazing, Terry, that you all were able to, you know, really poll folks and that they were thrilled about answering. I also find that when you ask someone about themselves or about their opinions, more often than not, they're delighted to share, right? People want to be heard. And so, you know, that's really cool. Same with this secret farm channel, right? I mean, if there's an avenue, it seems like more often than not, you'll get some honest responses. Maybe it's not what you wanted to hear, but sometimes that's just more informative. Tim, I don't want to take your thunder away here. I know I sort of covered that we really try to help local journalism, but do you want to talk about that?
Well, I think try to is the operative word. For some time, I've wanted to have deeper conversations with people like Terry about what we could actually do that would be helpful. You know, I have my assumptions, and just like talking to the community, you're going to learn something. Talking to editors and other journalists who are actually working and doing things, and the shoe leather journalism, what would actually be helpful, because so much of what we get is commentary on what somebody else reported now. I mean, you know, and I'm going to guess here, but I would think that there are certain columnists within the New York Times that get more readership than all but the largest, you know, the heaviest straight news stories. And so all of that kind of secondhand, third-hand discussion, that's where we get this, you know, the fight start. And the polarization is in that realm, as opposed to covering where the potholes are, or what went on at the, you know, at traditional old beat reporting, and what's at a meeting and who got arrested and all of that kind of meat and potatoes stuff. So I would like us to find a way to complement that sort of shoe leather journalism in a way, and we try to do it with data primarily now, where we are, you know, you can look at what your county is up to, and I respond to different folks who are looking at you know, can you put these 3 counties together or something like that? I try to be helpful that way. And then also in the past, we've done localized stories that we've distributed straight to rural outlets that maybe get some reporting done on something like the percentage of people using SNAP that they might not have time to get at, but the numbers are there and we can give it to them in a way that they can easily rewrite it or run it. Some will just run it. But there is no substitute for local journalism. And I talk to people about local journalism, and invariably the response I get from media professionals is regional, what I would consider regional or state journalism, not local. You know, it's like what's happening in the city limits, what's happening in the county. And the national perspective is that, you know, the whole state of Tennessee is local. And well, not to me, it's not. So that local, truly local stuff is extremely important, especially in rural areas. And I know that especially weeklies and a town like Keene that's fortunate enough to have still have a daily, you know, that's just tremendously important for civic health. Is my opinion on that too.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
just
Go
want to
ahead.
kind of bounce off just a little bit. And this is some years ago, and this is where I met Tim. We were at some kind of gathering, and there were these 2 brothers, the Bartcher Brothers. And I loved what they did. They basically saw, I'm going to botch this, I know, but the short end of this, these are two-man shop covering city council meetings, just covering their little area the best they could, because a lot of this was going unheard. And they would take their iPhones, they would go to a council meeting and record live the entire thing on Facebook. And I admired their effort and their passion so much, because they saw this need and filled. And they were actually, I think, a bit profitable too. They were, from what I understood. I don't know, however, and the challenge to that is sustainability. Like, how do you continue to that reporting if someone gets sick or they hit by the bus and scenario? But I still think about them a lot. Not creepy a lot, just often they cross my mind of like where they, you know, how they just saw this need in this tiny area where there was 0 news coverage, and they were putting it out there. I think for the, you know, for the good of journalism. Another great example, I think, of just local, and I'm going to pull up Chicago Block Club, whole history there, but what they're aiming to do is they have their reporters living in the neighborhoods they cover. And, you know, going to Tim's thing of civic health, I mean, how healthy is that? It's pretty awesome. I really admire efforts like that personally. I wish I could have a reporter in every farm bureau county across the Midwest, but, you know, one day.
Right. I think Tim and I would love to have just a squadron covering the country as well,
Yeah,
but
I know.
it's not so easy.
One day, guys, we'll just pull it together.
More journalists, please. Well, great. I wanted, Terry, to ask you just a little bit about the Radically Rural Summit that I know you've been involved with. And you especially have been working on the journalism track of this summit. And you know, I'm just curious, I know Tim was wondering too about sort of what organizations have been represented in this summit, and what the vibe has been, sort of like our you know, it's been a tough 2 years for everyone, I think. Are you seeing people just really discouraged, or some hope yet? I don't know. And Pam and Tim, if you have a pulse check too, after Carrie, feel free.
Yeah, so Radically Rural started in 2018, and it was born out of an event that we called Connect, which was a local networking event that was built around a theme. We partnered with the Hannah Grimes Center for Entrepreneurship on that event, and then that led to a kind of a a partnership on radically rural, and there was a lot of excitement around small business startups and entrepreneurship and things of that nature. And we got to thinking that, it'd be kind of cool if we could create a summit whereby people that were experts in various aspects of rural life, rural economic development, land, agriculture, things of that nature could come to Keene and talk about what they were seeing nationally, not unlike this conversation that's going on here, and to share ideas and to network around things that could make their small communities stronger. So we have 7 different tracks: healthcare, main streets and downtowns, arts and culture. We have a track on land use that is pretty well attended. I think I mentioned entrepreneurship, community journalism, I may be forgetting one, but each of those aspects of rural life or community life we felt were really important to have experts come in and talk about and share their ideas and things of that nature. And the first couple of years we were pandemic free, so we could have a lot of people gather, and I think we're somewhere around 600 the second year we did it. Pandemic hit, so we were remote that year, and I think there were like 500 online attendees, which was pretty good. Last year was a little less than that. We had a hybrid event. This year we're hoping we're going to continue with a hybrid theme, but we're hoping to have more. I wanted community journalism to be part of it from the beginning because, as I mentioned before, I don't think you can have a healthy community without a healthy local news organization kind of keeping track of things. And so the sessions that we do are meant to scale either up or down based on the size of a news organization. We got one-person startups that attend this, and we've got larger news organizations. But the themes that we try to organize around are things that we think are transferable and that people can come and take part in and take home. Last year we spent one session completely talking about how to fundraise for journalists, which was pretty well attended. And then we did something completely on trust. How do you build local trust? And every year we also do a tools for journalists session that we call Crazy Good, which is kind of this one-person romp through all these wonderful ideas about how to be a better journalist, how to do better data work, how to organize yourself. But it's all this useful stuff that people can take home. And so that was the theme of it. It's just to help small communities through a variety of different tracks. Tackle issues, get better at things, be better connected, make connections. I mean, the best part about this is that I think we're up to like 46 states that have attended this in one degree or another. We're trying to get Alaska in this year. We'll see. But it's been fun. It's been great. I love doing the journalism session. There are a lot of young folks that turn up that are from small organizations that are just trying to figure it out. And we're all there to try to share information.
Very cool. What about the tenor? Do you have anything to say about, it's journalism?
Yeah, they're all excited.
Really?
Well, yeah, because I think it's in part because for the people that came last year, they were able to get away. I mean, that in itself was just remarkable.
Right.
And they feed off each other because so many of these folks are young, or they're trying to figure it out. They're with startups or they're with small nonprofits and things of that nature. They run the gamut. I didn't find anybody unenthusiastic. There were people worried about, their own news operations, but they were all sponges. They all wanted to meet each other. They all wanted to chat. They all wanted to exchange info. And in that regard, it was a very enthusiastic gathering.
I love hearing that.
Could I ask,
Pam or Tim? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm not a journalist, never have been. I've been a dairy farmer for 31 years
Mm.
in Western.
My dad was a dairy farmer.
in the most Western county in New York State. And we were pretty oppressed because of our neighbor to the east, New York City.
Mhm.
I looked it up the other day. There were two papers in the county back when I was there in 97. I moved to Madison, Wisconsin to get another perspective on the world. And there are two, and there's another paper across the state line in Warren, Pennsylvania. And they all had editors back then when I ran for the New York State Assembly as a Republican, I'm ashamed to say. They all had editors and staffs. And when I looked it up the other day, they only have one editor covering 3 papers in 2 states. And I assume they don't have hardly any staff. And they're all owned by some investment group in the Midwest. So I have a question. Who owns your guys' papers? How many of you are locally owned?
We are.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Terry is a unique situation, and wonderfully so. The way you've gotten into the events and the way you're totally enmeshed, and it's clear to me, someone who's local. I mean, you know that community, you care about it. There's no substitute for that. And Jim, as you're discussing, in many cases, the weeklies have been bought by chains, and there are multiple papers produced out of one spot, and in many cases, they call them ghost papers in some cases, where really there's no there. They print what comes in. They print maybe building permits and land records and that sort of thing, stuff they can just download. And the bright spot outside of Keene, in many ways, is the nonprofit sector, in my opinion, that there has been expansion in nonprofit news. There's a lot more newsrooms, and it seems like those are where the jobs are in many cases for younger journalists, because you've got to start and learn the trade. It's you don't just step right into the upper level. And then also I wanted to make sure that both Terry and Pam, Terry, you had mentioned that, is it your health initiative where you've got a collaborative going on with other newsrooms? How's that working?
Yeah, so New Hampshire has a pretty robust, luckily, still pretty robust news network, or network of news organizations, ranging from digital only to legacy print. We also have what's called the Granite State News Collaborative, which is a group of 20 news organizations that share their content. And the organization actually produces original content too. So, and that includes, I think, almost all of the major newspapers. It also includes New Hampshire Public Radio and New Hampshire Public Broadcasting. So we have this network that we share, which makes it, we're not a news desert. We're pretty well covered, and we're unusual in that regard. And it is kind of an example of what's possible, because anybody that wants to be part of the collaborative can be in that range. That's one person shops too, so you just have to be willing to share your content. And I think that's what makes that work. But as it related to the health reporting lab, we're able to use content, really strong health reporting from around the state, to make that part of what we share with our readers. And then we let all of our stuff go as well, and that gets broadly disseminated. So we're able to generate a lot of content without having to produce it all ourselves. And It's an unusual arrangement, to be sure. There are not a lot of these collaboratives. There's a few. There's one in North Carolina that I'm aware of, and maybe a couple others. But it's a nonprofit. It's not a nonprofit, but it operates like a nonprofit, and it has a fiscal sponsor, and it's a pretty powerful thing to have here, and something that we try to leverage pretty extensively.
See, your members don't compete with each other. There's no reason not to collaborate, right?
We haven't been competing with each other for years. I mean, that used to be a thing when I had hair, you know, that
Me
we
too.
would worry about getting scooped, but that, you know, that's now if somebody breaks a big story, it's like, all right, you acknowledge that that's great work and we can run it tomorrow. So there's been a lot of things that have changed, Jim, over the years, not all for the better, but that's one aspect of things that I think is an advantage. The Associated Press, which used to be that cooperative that a lot of member news organizations would be part of, has become too expensive for papers like us. We rely on this collaborative for, and quite frankly, the content is superior. And we're lucky, you know, we realize that, and it's something we try to take full advantage of.
One thing, back in 2016, the world started to come apart, not just because of Trump, but because of the algorithm of Facebook. And it caused me to start a research project. Most farmers don't start research projects, but so this August, I'm going to present a paper at the Rural Sociology Society entitled Reimagining Rural Journalism in Support of Grassroots Activism. And I didn't start out to study rural journalism, and I didn't start out to present a paper to the Rural Sociology Society. What I started out to do was try to figure out what was broke. And I've come to a pretty strong opinion that you guys are going to save the country. It's rural, and it's not, this is not an empty thought. This happened before, during what was known as the Gilded Age. And it was very much like this, chaos around different technologies, steam engines and railroads and grain elevators. And it was monopolistic and crazy. And just as an aside, the Gilded Age got its name from a book written then. It was the first book that Mark Twain ever wrote. And it was satire. It was satire poking fun at the insanity that was going on in business and society back then. And several pieces of well, it was a hot idea of this grassroots activism led a lot by farmers and rural communities and their journalists that were actually having dialogue with their readers on a regular basis. And out of that, there were like 150 rural papers in Oklahoma or Kansas alone. And there was this rich dialogue where ideas were bubbling up. And the populist movement that sprung up out of that, and it wasn't right wing or left wing, it was regular people mad at the ruling elites who were part of the problem, a big part of the problem. And so out of that came some significant legislation. A few of those things, and I've not got the list complete yet, were the Rural Free Delivery Act, the Sherman Antitrust Act, the Capper-Volstead Act, and progressive income taxes. It really, and back then the progressive politicians that hurried to get ahead of the parade were actually Republicans, Teddy Roosevelt, those guys. Mm-hmm. So the secret is you can't be partisan. If you're partisan, then I'll put you, it's binary, and I'll put you in a camp. What breaks the back of this partisan insanity is a third force that can't be bought or snookered by the partisan arguments. And a kind of
Yeah.
a truth thing. You guys are pretty close to the truth.
We certainly try. I mean,
Right.
it's
And is the more money that gets in the system through urban journalism and media, the further they get from the truth and more they get in bed with politicians and corporations. And exactly what happened back in the Gilded Age.
yeah, it's a tricky phenomena for sure. And you know, you saying that we're going to save the world, you know, I don't know. I'm just trying to do good work, but it's,
One
you know,
last- One last point, you've confirmed a lot of what I've figured out the hard way, but why don't you do this every month?
well, it's interesting that you ask that actually. And I'll answer that. And then I think we'll segue into some more questions if other people have thoughts or things to share. But Jim, you're you're hitting on a project that I've been slowly trying to get off the ground here. The last time we had a discussion like this, folks really enjoyed it. And like you, there was some appetite for more of it. And then the holidays happened, and somewhere in the middle, I had COVID, and you know, life gets that way. But I have, along with my colleague Tyler, who is part of the Rural Assembly, started messaging folks about a rural journalism collective where we could have these sorts of discussions, maybe not monthly, but more regularly. And so that actually reminds me that I was supposed to drop a form in the chat here for you all to fill out so that we have your email addresses. And if you're interested in being on the Rural Journalism Collective list, we can certainly get you on there that way. So hang tight with me. We're getting this off the ground. I see, you know, the chat has been flying by here. I am going to hunt for this link to the form that I'm supposed to drop in.
I'll step. Why don't well, you go ahead and do that. And so let's open it up. And if folks have other folks would like to make a comment or ask a question, just unmute yourself and speak. And if we have too much traffic, we'll play traffic cop. Who would like to share some?
Yeah, hey, Tim, just wanted to ask if you could maybe talk a little bit about the collaborations, partnerships and stuff that the Yonder does, you know, with other publications. I mean, anyway, I'm interested in, when I write for the Yonder, like how many people read it. You know, it's an online platform, of course, but then like, you know, I share it on Twitter, but like, what do you all do for, you know, does it get out to rural papers? I would love that, you know, to see more of that, et cetera. So tell me about that, or the plans you have for that in the future, et cetera.
So, and that's a great segue into talking a little bit more about the Institute for Nonprofit News Rural Project. But we're open source, so everything we publish is republishable if we are the originator of it. Photos have their own rights sometimes, so you know, we've got an AP subscription. We can't share those, obviously, but content that we produce and publish originally is available. Our graphics we produce, etc. We share. I pull stuff from other outlets like Investigate Midwest, which is Pam's organization. Their story on foreign ownership of farmlands, for example, I will run that for sure. And I've run some of their stories on the impact of different chemicals on communities, and their stories about the Farm Bureau's impact on farm policy. Really good stuff. So I think more of us, like Terry is doing within the state of New Hampshire, I think within the nonprofit world, there's more sharing going on like that. It's not formalized. So then within the Institute for Nonprofit News, Pam and I are part of an effort that they're spearheading to help newsrooms that want to do more rural coverage get the resources to do that. The idea is that there would be some funds there to help people do more rural reporting, and then on a voluntary basis collaborate with other groups. Like we're going to do stories on topic Y, and we're going to share this data set, and we got an editor with an expertise in a particular area who can help us pull together stuff, and then either a package or a series of local stories. I hope we'll be able to do more with that in the coming year. We share always with 100 Days in Appalachia. If we have an Appalachian story, they pick it up generally. I pull stuff from them occasionally. ProPublica is another outlet that I look at a lot. So I tend to be pulling stuff in more than I'm pushing it out. And, like I said, I would like to change that. And Investigate Midwest, you've got your own methods for how you share and how you distribute, right?
We do. Yeah. I mean, part of we're still trying to refine this. But it is, I mean, anybody can go to our website. There's a Steal Your Stories kind of thing. You can pull it down and republish with credit, unless there's a thing to it that you, if it's under an embargo or et cetera. But and then also just trying to alert editors on a list about what we have new that comes out. But again, it's sort of a process we're still refining. But yeah, we've been really grateful.
Tim.
Oh, we've been very grateful to Tim. I think Daily Yonder has got this nailed. You guys are my hero.
Well, I think also that the idea of, the newsrooms have always been nonprofit. You can always lose money with a newsroom. The advertising and circulation, they need to be for profit. But so Terry, I'm interested, do you feel like you're getting squeezed out of the journalism game by the nonprofit growth?
Well, no, because we're moving in that direction ourselves. We started pivoting away from advertising revenue as kind of our main channel of support a couple of years ago. Not deliberately, it kind of pivoted for us, So it forced us to kind of evaluate what we were getting from our readers in terms of subscriptions. And we felt that we needed to ask our readers to support our journalists directly, which has been part of this letter writing campaign that, please support our journalists by getting a subscription. Please support our journalists by getting a subscription and making a donation. All of those types of things have kind of swung into gear. On top of that, we do an annual crowdfunding effort, which we are doing right now. We tell our readers what we're fundraising around, what the purpose is. Last year, we wanted to hire a State House reporter, so we told them we needed 35 grand to do that, plus benefits, and they raised the money. So we hired it. Took us a while, but we found a State House reporter, and he's been working with us now for several months. This whole health reporting lab, I'm out talking to philanthropists and donors and some readers about raising close to $90,000 to support that on an annual basis. I think after 3 years, we'll have figured out a way to cement it into the overall operation. So we've pivoted pretty directly to asking our readers for support and being kind of unashamed to ask for it. We've kind of told them the stories that that Jim was referring to about, formerly independently, privately held, small newspapers that were the lifeblood of a community getting gobbled up by hedge funds. And then their newsrooms gutted. I mean, those are true stories, and they've kind of ripped up a good portion of the country and have created news deserts. And we say, look, we understand that to some degree the industry has done this to itself. We're not going to do that, but we need your help if we're going to be supportive. And then I think if you're going to ask readers for more money, or to pay more in a subscription cost every year, which is getting up there now, you got to be able to show them how you're taking their investment and putting it back into the newsroom. This isn't one of those things where you can, it lines or becomes part of the bottom line. It is all about demonstrating how their gift or their donation or their money essentially is going to strengthen the product. And that again, it's just, you just got to keep telling people that, they'll after a while, I think they absorb it. They do appreciate it. I get every time we write letters, I get bunches of notes saying, keep at it. This crowdfunding effort, I'm getting some pretty favorable reaction right now to it. That piece of it, asking for reader support, asking for philanthropic support, acting like a nonprofit, that, is part of that, I think is going to be part of our future. In the end, it may make more sense for the Sentinel to become a nonprofit, and that's something we'll take a look at. But we should be asking for more support of journalism, because it's pretty damn important, and a lot of donors and philanthropists are starting to see that.
Yeah. I see some actionable advice in the chat over here. Anyone else have questions? Otherwise, I know we've been on Zoom for a while now, so don't want to drag it out.
I have something I wanted to suggest to Tim and Pam. We're trying to do a lot of solutions journalism work, which means, we got a problem, we're trying to figure out how to fix it, who's doing a good job at it. Sometimes it's easier for us if somebody's already solved the problem out there, particularly in rural communities, to know what problem they solved, because it's a pretty good chance we've got the same problem here. So to the degree that the Daily Yonder or Pam, your work uncovers places that have figured things out, that have made things better, that have really moved the needle, I would like to know, because there's a pretty damn good chance that we got the same problem here and we don't have a solution. So sometimes starting with the problem solved makes it a little easier for us to do the reporting on the other end. And then we've got something to point our readers to, or government leaders or whomever, see these folks have figured it out. And I think that's something that you folks probably come across with some regularity, and we'd love to know about it.
Cool, thank you. That's good advice.
And Pam, also, you guys have merged, added Iowa investigative reporting to investigate Midwest.
Yeah, no,
I
sure,
just want people to
definitely.
know about that.
Oh, no, thank you. I mean, this is kind of, again, some of the landscape and challenges, a little bit of nonprofit news, because it's all hard. I mean, I think we face sort of can face some of the same issues as other, for-profit. The difference I'm told between nonprofit and for-profit is just where the profits go, right? So yeah, there were colleagues through INN, and they were just kind of, the COVID had shed some light on the current ED, who wanted to spend more time with family, and you wear a lot of hats as ED of a executive director of a nonprofit news organization, and so it was just more quality, I think. So yeah, they weren't sure what they were going to do, and we got in touch because they've been colleagues for a long time, and said, hey, what if we take you over? So we really wanted to, we've worked with them on and off throughout the years, but we wanted also to have a presence in Iowa. So it served both things. They felt it's a little sad. They voted a few weeks ago to dissolve the organization officially as part of the agreement that we were doing. And I felt sad to see kind of a member dissolve in that way. However, everyone's optimistic about the future that we have now doing journalism, and kind of focusing it more on ag and rural. I mean, that kind of thing. So I don't know if that touched on it. Bottom line, we took them over, and we're all happy about it. Still.
Yeah, yeah, and in a cooperative way. I just thought that
Yes,
was
yeah,
really
exactly.
cool, and that you're going to keep some kind of service there for Iowa and the legacy that they
Definitely.
have, which is very strong. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. Definitely. I mean, again, it kind of gives us a newsroom per se, and we didn't want to just sort of disintegrate their brand. So we did have like a little logo, Iowa Watch, a newsroom of Investigative. So that's the tag we're putting to the work that they're doing. So people there and their dedicated audience will know, it's coming from at least the same umbrella, but it'd be definitely just a little bit different in focus. Thank you.
Yeah, so cool to hear about the initiatives and the stuff going on in all of these newsrooms. I appreciate you all for coming to hang out with me a little bit, and the audience as well. I thought I would make one more plug just in case folks didn't see. My colleague Teresa dropped the link for that Google form that I mentioned in the chat, and so we'd be delighted if you filled it out, and then that way I can email all of you folks and invite you to get in on more emails from me, I guess. Whether or not you want that is up for debate. And I see that everyone, Pam, Terry, and Tim have dropped their emails into the chat as well. And so that's, I suppose an invitation to reach out if you feel so inclined, about Radically Rural or about what Investigate Midwest is up to, or if you want to send Tim stories, he says, pitch away.
Well, thank you.